Welcome to the next episode of our podcast on negotiation. And this week, with a very special guest, with the one and only negotiation ninja, Mark Raffan. Mark, great to have you with us.
Thanks so much for having me, Remy. I appreciate it, man.
You're very welcome, Mark. You've had a long history of negotiation excellence in business as a procurement person, as something that you probably already got from your mom's and dad's milk, right? You come from a family of entrepreneurs, successful entrepreneurs. Then you continued in business, and at some point you decided to become a ninja. Yeah. Tell us a little bit more about this moment. How did that happen?
Yeah, it was about 6 years ago. I decided I didn't want to do the corporate thing anymore, and it actually all started in a bar, in a pub, where I was having way too much to drink and complaining to my friends that there was no great negotiation content out there that I really liked. And they said, "Well, don't moan about it. Like, do something about it, as all good friends should." And I had a few more drinks, and then I thought, "That's a great idea. I am going to do something about it." So I went home in a bit of a drunken stupor, went onto Amazon, bought all of the wrong gear for podcasting. The next day, started the Negotiations Ninja podcast, which led into a training company, and that's where we are today.
All right, that's awesome. So it sounds like alcohol has also some positive side
All good
effects. Yeah,
stories start in a bar.
all good stories start in a bar. Yeah. So then you became a ninja, and now you're a best-selling author. Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce the book,
Yes.
which has recently come out: Nine Secrets to Win Deals and Influence Stakeholders: A Field Guide to B2B Negotiation by one and only Mark. Mark, tell us a little bit more about this book.
Yeah, thank you. Nine Secrets to Win Deals and Influence Stakeholders is basically my attempt to educate as many salespeople as humanly possible on how to negotiate correctly. I find that the vast majority of salespeople that I work with have no concept how to actually protect value, build value, retain value, and grow value in a negotiation. They're really good at the other parts of the sales process, right? Like they're really good at prospecting, they're really good at sort of discovery conversations. But as soon as we move into commercial negotiations, for some reason, it all seems to go off the rails pretty quickly. So this is my way to be able to communicate to them from a procurement perspective to say, hey, you guys are screwing this up. Here's how you fix this. Here's how you build and retain and grow more value in your commercial negotiations. And that's very important to be able to talk about that. Look, I'm not a sales guy, right? Like I'm not going to teach you how to prospect better. I'm not going to teach you how to have discovery conversations better. My expertise lies purely in the negotiation side of things. So bottom of funnel activity, that's where the expertise is, and it's written from the perspective of a procurement person to salespeople. So it's not written from the perspective of a salesperson, but from the other side of the table, because I've seen hundreds and thousands of sales conversations happen, not only just with myself, but with others as well. And there's a few key mistakes that many salespeople make. And this is my hope to be able to help them with this book.
Awesome. So, Mark, how did it all start? How did you get this idea to write the book? Also at a bar?
It was probably over a glass of wine or something like that. No, it was just my frustration more than anything else. My frustration with, hey, look, there's a simpler way to convey this information, and I find that a lot of the books I read in the business world tend to be very theoretical, very academic, very high level. And the goal and the intention of the book was to strip away a lot of the theory, strip away a lot of the academics, and just say, this is how you do this. Do these things, right? Take these steps. Do this, then do this, then do this. Okay, go do that thing. And that was the whole it's meant to be a field guide. It's meant to be instructional. It's meant to be very applicable. It's meant to be something that you can use immediately, right? Like there's activities to do throughout the book. There's exercises to do throughout the book. It's not meant to be sort of my magnum opus of negotiation theory. There should be a lot of familiar ideas in the book for those who read the book, but there should also be some things where you're like, oh, I didn't see it from that perspective, or I didn't think about it from that perspective, or that's a different way to look at things. And that was my goal.
Wow, amazing. Obviously, this is a very catchy title here. 9 secrets to win deals and
Yes, it's meant to
influence.
be.
Yeah, exactly. You did a great job with that. So, would you be ready and willing to show or to reveal a little bit of the principles or secrets that you share in the book?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, principle number one is right in the title. The reason that we chose that title was because there was a lot of thinking that went into that. How many do we reveal was the first question we asked ourselves. More than 9 becomes too much, because if people see more than 2 digits in an instructional guide, their mind immediately goes, okay, that's too much. I don't want to read anymore. That's crazy. But if you go less than like 8, then people are like, well, how much can you really cover in 7 things? So the number 9 was very intentional to cover a certain amount of things to make it sort of catchy for someone or persuasive for someone to be able to actually tie into it. And we know that the word secrets converts. When people see the word secrets, for whatever reason, they're like, oh, I want to know the secret. So persuasion is built into the book straight from the title. And everything in the book is about how do we structure negotiations in the correct way to be able to be as successful as we can be. And so the idea is to improve the probability of success as much as humanly possible. And the way that I describe this book to folks is this is sort of the tactical guide to strategy. If you've ever thought about or heard about strategy and negotiation before, you've probably heard of some esoteric concepts like going out onto the balcony and um, BACNA and things like that. And for a lot of different people, when they hear those kinds of things, they're like, I don't know, I don't know what that means, right? Like I have no idea how that actually works. And so our idea was just to simplify everything and make it as applicable as humanly possible. The first secret is the most important secret in our mind, and the conversation that you and I had prior to this was, wow, that's different than you've seen this sequence before, which was to get very clear on what your aspirational goals for the negotiation are. The vast majority of people that I speak to in the sales world have no idea what they want to achieve from their negotiations. So if I ask them, hey, what do you want to get from this? The number one answer that I get from the vast majority of people is, oh, I want to get a good deal.
Good deal. Yeah, exactly.
Right. To which my response is that actually doesn't mean anything, right? Like,
True.
congratulations, you want a good deal. So does everyone. But
Exactly.
what does a good deal mean for you? And getting them to think differently about, well, okay, well, what does a good deal mean? What does that mean? I make more money? Does that mean I reduce risk? Does that mean I improve communication? Does that mean I improve my relationship with someone? It could mean a number of different things. And the goal is to try and get them to think, okay, well, what are my aspirational goals for this negotiation? I mean, we're all going into a season of aspirational goals. On January 1st, the vast majority of the Western world sets the aspirational goal to lose weight,
The
right? So they
resolutions.
right, so they set all of these great well, I want to make more money, I want to lose weight, I want to, right, like all of these aspirational goals come out on January 1st, but they don't mean anything unless there's an action plan behind them, right? So you can say, well, I want to lose weight in 2024, or I want to make more money in 2024, but what does that actually mean? How are you going to do that? So the second part of that is to say, okay, take those aspirational goals now and let's break them down. What are we going to actually negotiate into the deal in order to help you achieve that aspirational goal? So, if the aspirational goal is to make more money, are you going to sell more seats? Are you going to cross sell other services? Are you going to upsell to a premium product? Are you going to improve working capital by improving payment terms? Are you going to reduce the amount of labor that you put into the contract so that you maximize your profitability. There could be a number of different ways that you make more money out of the negotiation. But we don't think of those levers often. We just go, oh, I want to make more money. And then we just kind of wing it in our negotiations to go, I'll figure it out as I go, I guess. It's a massive mistake.
Thank you so much, Mark, for sharing this, and I hope your book will inspire many B2B negotiators to look into the way they handle their negotiations. Mark is also a super successful podcaster with his Negotiation Ninja. I think you are one of the most popular podcasts, if not the most popular podcast in the world.
It's me and Kwame Christian battling it out for the top spot.
Yes, exactly. Yes, and. You meet a lot of people from sales, from procurement, and I was wondering whether you would dare to synthesize a little bit about the changes that we are currently undergoing in the field of sales / procurement negotiations. Is there anything that in particular that you observe, which you would classify as, evolutionary or revolution or seismic changes that out there in the field?
Yeah, I mean, I would be foolish if I didn't mention the prominence and growth of AI in negotiations. I think that if you are not paying attention to what AI is doing in the negotiation world, you're really missing out on massive opportunities to take advantage of that area, and you're also missing out on what you should be defending against when it comes to those specific areas. It blows me away to see how rapidly that space is changing and how it's growing and what are all the things that are going on within that world. I mean, one such example is just utilizing. Kelt Jensen actually writes about this. For all the listeners, pick up Kelt's new book, Negotiation Essentials, where he talks about a study that he did around utilizing AI, specifically ChatGPT, in negotiations. And anyone who utilized ChatGPT within their negotiations who also already had an education in negotiations did better in their negotiations. But that last part is really important, right? If you already had an education in negotiation, you already were pretty well versed in negotiation theory, tactics, strategy, then you did better. If you did not, you did not do better. And that's really important because some of the information, a lot of the information that ChatGPT feeds you sometimes on certain topics is is pretty nonsense, right? Like it's surface level information that may not necessarily elicit the right responses that you're looking for or the right information, which is why that data is so interesting to me because Kelt basically says, look, if you know what you're doing already, this is going to make you better. But if you
Yes,
don't know what you're doing, it's actually not going to make you better at all. So
that's
we're
correct.
seeing that in a lot of different circumstances, and we're also seeing like AI bots negotiating on behalf of people, and a bunch of really interesting pricing AI technologies that are coming out, and legal AI technologies that are coming out. It's very, very interesting space.
Yes, I don't know if you guys know that, but we run negotiation competitions for students and for professionals. And in our this year's edition, all participants, all professionals, yes, that took part in our competition, negotiated in one of the rounds against guess what or whom against an autonomous AI negotiation bot from Uncapped, which is an Australian startup company that is making has made a huge progress on this, and this was absolutely amazing. This was absolutely amazing for many participants to see. Well, first of all, this whole thing can easily pass the I forgot the what's the name of that individual? What's the name of the test?
Turing?
Turing test. Yes, thank you so much, Mark. Yes, easily can pass the Turing test, but that we've already experienced many years ago. But actually, the autonomous algorithms are getting scarily good. As in negotiation, they are able to to react really, really quickly to proposals, counter proposals. They are obviously unbiased in their calculations. Yes, they have very little preference for certain ways we behave. Yes, and therefore. And therefore they can perfectly separate relationship from substance, as which many people cannot. And what we also notice is that for individuals, negotiating with machines when they know that they are machines can be frustrating. Can be really frustrating because one of the variables that is used to program those machines is the intensity of negotiating. So how fast do I concede? Yes, right? Because ultimately, yes, there is this movement in the northeastern direction, which means creating value based on differences in preferences. But there is also movement towards our end of the efficiency frontier, which means by either making concessions or escalating demands. Yes, and these machines do have a variable. Typically, these algorithms do have a variable which can be set. Yeah? So how intensive shall this program? How intensive shall this negotiation be? And very often people find it frustrating when it's too intensive, as they are not used to machines telling them what to do and what not to.
Do you think these companies that are creating these things, I mean, obviously they're going to deploy it with large enterprise, where large enterprise is going to have these machines negotiate on their behalf. Do you think there's an ethical responsibility for those companies to disclose to the people that the bots are negotiating with that this is in fact a bot?
I do believe that transparency within this process would increase, would strengthen the relationship between the vendors and their clients. Yes, so I'm all for disclosing it. But I know also that there are different opinions. There are different opinions on this topic. Well, especially that we are very quickly approaching the moment where artificial intelligence reaches the level of general intelligence, not only specific for design for a specific problem in a specific industry, which means negotiating the price of eggs for Walmart, or I don't know, the price of a container for Maersk or whatever else, right? But also become generically smart enough to handle different unstructured problems.
What would you do? I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this. What would you do in that kind of a situation if you were faced with, and you were in a negotiation, a commercial negotiation, and you were faced with knowing that you're negotiating with a bot? Would you continue that negotiation, or would you immediately default to saying, I have no interest in this, I want to negotiate with a human being?
I just noticed that as well, and obviously our audience too, right? It's possible to take someone from his natural habitat, but this natural habitat will get him sooner than later. So to those of you guys who will only listen to us later on, one of Sergio, one of our listeners and viewers, mentioned fantastic, the interviewee interviewing the interviewer. But this is I absolutely love it, Mark. You're a great podcaster. I'm one of your faithful listeners. I was almost getting ready to say, hey, how does it feel to be in a different role? But apparently it must have made you uncomfortable because you
I'm not used to being the one who answers the questions. I'm used to being the one who asks the questions. But seriously, I do want to know, because if I was faced with that, if I knew that I was negotiating against a bot, logically, I know, at least based on the information that I've already seen, I know that the bot understands all of human bias. I know that the bot does not have any human bias. I also know that the bot doesn't get deal fatigue, right? And so I'm probably going to lose. So I want to be in that. I don't want to be in that kind of. I'm immediately going to say, I have no interest in this. I want to talk to a human being. What would you do in that situation?
I would kindly ask about the objective function with which these bots have been programmed. Yes, because ultimately the
Interesting.
behavior of those bots boils down to how they were structured or how they were built to behave. Yes,
Right.
and and I think there are different schools of thoughts of thought out there. And so some of those bots are built to extract value. Yes, so where their dominating objective is make sure you get as much as it's possible, as
Right.
given the following market information, given the following past data, past transactional data with other vendors, yes, with other
Right.
partners, and get me the best deal in numbers. I don't care about anything else. So that's it's possible. It's possible, and that will indeed lead to a very high dissatisfaction with the process on the vendor side. And
Do you think they would reveal that to you? I don't think that the company would like, and also if I'm a company that's implementing that tech, would I understand how the algorithm is actually, like, the person that's probably managing it on the other side of the table doesn't doesn't understand how the algorithm was built in the first place. It just knows that this is a negotiation bot that we use, right?
right,
So I wonder if they would even know that. Like, if I'm going to try and maximize value from my organization as much as humanly possible. This is why I think it's so important for people not to default to one negotiation strategy or one negotiation aspect, because if you go in assuming that the counterparty is going to search for a collaborative negotiation where we come together and we're transparent with each other and we're all going to hold hands and sing kumbaya. What if you're faced with another negotiator who doesn't feel that way, who's looking to maximize utility and who's looking to maximize value for their organization and really doesn't care, right? Like, doesn't give a shit about you or what you're trying to maximize or how you're trying to do things. This like my biggest pet peeve about, I'm going to go on a bit of a rant here. My biggest pet peeve about people who read negotiation books, is that they only read one. They'll read one negotiation book and then assume that they know about negotiation. It's like saying, well, I'm only going to read one marketing book, or I'm only going to read one management book, or I'm only going to read one accounting. Like, it's insane. It's insane to think that you know about a subject if you only read one thing. So, like, for the listeners, if you're listening to my rant, please, for the love of God, pick up several negotiation books, not just mine. Pick up Kelt's and pick up Chris Voss and pick up Jim Camp and pick up Alan Sang and pick up all of these different books where you can read about negotiation from different perspectives, because it's going to give you a much more holistic idea of the way that different people approach it.
yes, thank you, Mark, for this rant. Apparently, there are some things that you feel emotional about, and it's good
Yeah,
to
very.
experience. Yeah, it's good to experience it here on our in this episode. So let me answer the question which preceded the rant. So do I believe whether they would reveal it? Well, that would be the ultimate test of credibility and trustworthiness of our partners. Yes, there is only one instance in which they would want to conceal it, and in that instance is indeed pure positional competitive bargaining. As in all other cases, we can both do better if we know that we are going to cooperate. As and failure to answer this question as means to me immediately, hey, this process is set up to exert value, as to extract the most value for the company that has set it
Yeah,
up.
or I'll just lie to you,
Or
right?
you would lie to me, and then
Yeah. Yeah, I know.
would,
We're looking for a win-win, Remy.
yeah, like
We
always,
want
right?
you to win too.
Oh, of course I would. But in general, Mark, this is a critical question. Yes, this is a critical question which ultimately reflects the ethics of business making. And
Right.
so, what does it mean when we revert to technological solutions to solve certain business problems? Right. Well, machines do not have their own ethics.
Right.
The ethics of machines is programmed by human beings. Yes, and which means also automatically it means that if someone decides to use Pactum or Uncapped or whatever company is whatever company offering similar algorithms, they will have to make those choices. Yes, they will have to tell the programming company what are their objectives, and while defining the objectives, well, they will reflect their own personal ethics and morale. Yes, and I think we had a very long debate in our competition, or between my dearest and longest friend Peter Kesting and myself, about what is fair. Also in business, is it fair to get as much as we can, or is it fair to get as much as we deserve? We're not going to have it right now because Mark is already getting ready to
I'm
ask
ready,
the
man.
next question. Yes, I
I
see
am
it.
absolutely ready.
His tongue is itching him right now as we speak. I will then switch over, right, and ask my next question. You mentioned adaptability,
Yeah.
yes, which means there is, just as there is not one universal book to unite them all, there is no one universal strategy that guarantees success in every setting.
Right.
So, and we also know from very recent research that strategic adaptability is important, as it correlates with the quality of the outcomes. What's your take from the field, Mark? Do you see people out in the field on the sales or procurement side who are able to react to spontaneously revealed unknowns, right, or to surprises that they might experience based on wrongly made assumptions previously with respect to negotiating style, credibility, trustworthiness, or whatever may you? What is your take on strategic adaptability from the field?
There definitely is some strategic adaptability. I would say that it's very industry specific, oftentimes I've found, and it's often a result of your ability to adapt is a result of your history of failure, as strange as that sounds. So the more that you have failed, quote unquote, or the more that things have popped up in the past that you didn't expect, or that went wrong, or that took a turn that you didn't expect it to take, the more able you are to be adaptable to those kinds of situations. Um, Michael Wheeler is a great professor out of Harvard who writes about negotiation, great negotiation professor. He talks about adaptability in negotiations a lot. And he's got one book, I can't remember I think it's called The Art of Negotiation, actually.
The
Yeah,
jazz.
exactly. He talks about negotiation like jazz, right? Like a great musician, a great jazz musician is able to adapt on the fly in certain situations based on how the rest of the ensemble is playing, based on the new drum set that the drummer goes into, based on the crowd and what they're reacting to, and all of those kinds of situations. That person is adaptable. They're moving and shaping in the negotiation based on the music, so to speak, that's being played around them in that circumstance. But he makes a really important caveat to that. He said, good jazz musicians are also just great musicians. They've learned how to read music really well. They've reached a level in their music playing ability that means that they are top level at what they're doing. You can't just pick up an instrument and start playing jazz and make it sound good. You have to go through all of the lessons and learn the theory and learn all of that stuff in order to play jazz. And so I think the same thing is true for negotiation. To echo his points, the more educated you are, the more that you've done and the more you've seen where things have gone wrong, the easier it is for you to adapt in those kinds of situations. Where I see a lot of negotiations sort of stick to a specific framework is a result of lack of experience in education, certainly is one of them. Industry specifics, like I find in manufacturing and auto and those kinds of industries, it tends to be very linear in their approach. And I also find that those people that are not able to adapt are just stuck in their ways. They're not really focused on creating value so much as they are focused on getting a deal done. And that's a very small distinction, but it is very, very important. Because you may be thinking to yourself, well, what's the difference between getting a deal done and creating value? It's massive, right?
It
Because
is.
one could lead to expediting the deal and making the deal get done faster, and the other one could lead to actually slowing down the deal to go, okay, well, what else can we do here? What additional value can we, how creative can we get with this thing to make sure that we're maximizing value for the organization? And I think it, it depends on the industry that you're going into. There's some adaptability, but it's often a result of curiosity and experience and education.
Yes, thank you, Mark, for your take on it. Excuse me. We were with jazz back to pubs. One of the key skills at bars and pubs is influencing, right?
Yes.
And you guys will find influencing here in the second part of this book's title. Mark, tell us a few secrets about how to influence stakeholders.
Well, I think first, like a lot of people immediately default to a tactic for persuasion or influence. So you'll hear about scarcity or authority or likability or social proof or what, like list any of the sort of persuasion influence ideas. The number one thing that you have to think about when you're trying to persuade someone or influence someone, for that matter, is who am I trying to influence? That's it seems so simple, but so many people miss this. So I could go into a negotiation or any kind of conversation where I'm trying to persuade someone and I haven't thought about you. If I haven't thought about you in that kind of a situation, if I'm negotiating or trying to persuade you, and I'm thinking about things from my perspective, I'm going to use influential words that influence me, not that influence you. And that's a key mistake. So first thing is, who am I trying to influence? Who is my audience? What am I trying to influence them about? What am I actually trying to get them to change their mind on? Which means that I actually have to understand what you believe in first, right? So I can't influence you in a direction unless I understand what you believe in. And once I can understand what you believe in, then I can determine how I'm going to influence you. Once I can determine what you believe in and how I'm going to influence you, then I can influence and persuade you. So many people get straight to the tactic or the idea or like a fear of missing out argument or a framing like it to steal from Kahneman, like if I'm going to frame something differently. But I don't know if you think that way. So in
Mhm.
order for that thing to work, I first have to understand who am I influencing, what do they currently care about, what am I trying to influence them of, and then I can determine how am I going to influence them.
Well, thank you so much for this perspective, Mark. I was wondering, as you were explaining, let's say the other side of influencing, right? Or let's say the groundwork of influencing. Maybe it's not the other side; it's the foundation, right? Start with who. I was thinking about a question which I often get from, especially from my students, not so much executives, but students. Ethics, ethics of influencing and ethics of negotiation. We spoke a little bit about this right before we went on air. Mark, a question to you, spontaneous question to you. Do you believe we should get as much as we can, or do you believe we should get as much as we deserve? What is your
Who
personal
determines
take
what
on?
you deserve?
I'm sorry?
Who determines what you deserve?
Oh well, this is a very answering a question with a question, huh?
Well, that's an important question to clarify before I answer
Yes,
the question.
absolutely, absolutely. Let me try if I can shed some light into it. Let's say there are things like industry standards. Yeah. So,
Yeah,
for example, average gross profit
sure.
among the industry, or average profitability. Such statistics are available, and they can be really easily accessed nowadays, right? We
Yeah,
know, how much. What is the return of equity in banking? As we can really easily look up how much money banks are making on their equity. As we can really easily look up what is the average gross gross profit or gross margin in retail industry
sure.
or in pharmaceutical industry. Yes,
Right.
so I think it's not a unique value, right? Averages are not unique. It's a collection of higher and lower values. Typically, they don't line up on the same line. Yes, some are higher, some are lower. But in general, to answer your question, deserve means something which is based on standards that could be considered by outsiders to be fair.
Interesting. Okay. If we're going to get into this conversation, then that's great. Okay. So I'm going to continue to clarify this conversation with questions for you. So the
Sure.
question initially was, should we try to, and let me just make sure I understand this correctly. Should we try to always get more out of the negotiation and negotiate for more, or should we negotiate for what we deserve? Is that correct?
Yes, as much as you can. So, is
As
it
much
really
as you
max?
can versus
Yes.
what you deserve. Okay, so
Yes.
my clarifying questions would be, who gets to determine what we deserve? And if the answer to that question is, well, there's industry standards to be able to determine what gross margin is or profitability or what an index is showing, my answer is, yeah, but I deserve more than that. So are you going to tell me that I don't deserve more than that? And then if you tell me that I don't deserve more than that, what right do you have to tell me that I don't deserve more? If we're using an industry benchmark as that, and I say, no, no, like we are going to earn more than that, then I'm going to, at some point in time, we're going to have the conversation about, okay, well, then you must be delivering more value than the average in the industry, correct? So if
Correct.
I can show you more value than what the average in the industry, because it is an average, if I can show you more value than what the average in the industry is, then I should get paid more, correct?
Correct.
So then it's about what I get out of the negotiation. So it's not about what I deserve. Deserve is such a subjective term. It's same as the term fair. There is no such thing as fair. Fair is fictitious. It's a fabrication. It's fairy dust. Because what you believe is fair is very different than what I believe is fair. So if you say to me, well, Mark, it's fair for us to split the difference between these two things, I'm going to say bullshit, right? Like there's no reason why that should be fair to me. No, I deserve more out of this negotiation. I want more out of this negotiation. So I'm a big fan of trying to maximize value for as much as what you can.
Yes, that's awesome. Are there limits to maximizing value individually?
Help me to understand the context of that question.
Well, maximizing theoretically, when we look at the procedure of maximization, it has no limits. Yes,
Okay.
so basically, maximizing means I should get it all, and you and my partner nothing.
Okay, but then of course, there's a limit to maximizing value because if I maximize it too much, you're going to be out of business, right?
Correct.
So then there is a limit to maximizing value.
And where does this limit lie? Who determines this limit? Is it me who
Excellent
says?
question.
Is it me
Someone's
who's
got to say no at some point in time, right? So
right?
if I keep asking for something and you keep saying yes, that's not on me, that's on you.
Correct.
You have to make a decision to say no at some point in time.
Right.
It's not my fault that you're shitty at negotiation, right? So I'm going to try and keep asking, and if I keep asking and you keep saying yes, I'm going to keep taking out of that negotiation. But you've got to now ask for something in return. This is why negotiation education is so important because you've got to know when to say no. Like no. I cannot do that. Here's what I can do, right? Like being able to do that is so important, because otherwise you're going to be stuck in a situation where you're going to give and give and give, and we're going to get a contract formation point, and you're going to go, I can't do this. And then I'm going to say, what do you mean
Exactly.
you can't do this?
You just agreed.
Right. You just all the whole time you've been saying yes. So yeah, I'm a big believer in maximizing value as much as humanly possible. But look, at the end of the day, if I'm in a negotiation where I realize I'm actually just plowing this person down in a negotiation, but they come from a company with deep pockets, I don't care.
They can afford it. They
They
can
can
afford to
afford
be
it.
plowed.
They can afford it. But if they come from a small business, then I'm going to be like, look, this may not be a good idea for you, right?
Right.
So I guess it depends on how you view the negotiation. If I'm up against Walmart or Amazon or some, I care. I give zero fucks whether or not they are being owned in the negotiation.
Got it.
Starbucks, come on, they've got lots of
They
money.
have money, right? They have money. They can pay. Yeah.
Absolutely.
What we noticed in our competitions this year, last year, something that we were Peter and I, my friend Peter Kesting and I are trying to investigate as we speak, or planning to investigate in the near future, is when we noticed the reactions of individuals who experienced their negotiation partners wanting to maximize for themselves. And it's very interesting to observe, because typically experiencing that sort of attitude leads to no to value creation and kills trust before it can be built.
Yeah. How do you know though? I
Um,
would I would argue that a skilled negotiator who is maximizing value will be able to pull it off in a way that the person who's experiencing that would never even know.
I
They would
completely
never even
agree.
know. You would leave that negotiation going, phenomenal. I feel great about this. This deal's
I
great.
completely
In
agree,
fact,
Mark.
Mark was so nice, he even congratulated me and he told me that I did a great job. Wow, amazing.
Mark, you're absolutely right. Yes, we do have also those negotiators. But let me ask the first question first. Yes, how do we know? We ask at the end of each negotiation round. We ask the parties to evaluate each other. Yes, using a standard procedure, the SVIs. So basically, which measures strengths of the relationship. Yes, so we can quantify this indeed. Yes, we can quantify it. But I completely agree. In about we get about 50 teams in the student competition. So from about 50 teams, about one or two can do exactly what you've just described. Yeah? I call it the panda bear strategy, and it's really cool that it came from you. It popped up in our conversation. I call it the panda bear strategy is the ability to combine both at the same time,
Right.
building let's say building up the satisfaction while eating the whole cake, yes, or claiming the
Why
major
panda
part.
bear? Why did you choose that analogy?
Why panda bear? Well, because of the association that we have when we see panda bears. And this is the effect which these people, we've watched the videos of teams who ultimately end up great relational outcomes and a lot of value claimed for themselves. And what we notice is that they all share a certain characteristics or a certain set of characteristics. Yes, they come across as pandas. They are so funny. They are so
Yeah, very
outspoken.
charismatic, very welcoming,
Exactly. Super
happy.
kind, smiling,
Yeah.
right? Hey, how do you say that? Let's hold hand and sing Kumbaya, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
This sort of mentality. While what happens in the background is hardcore value optimization. So how much do I need to push in a possibly kindest way? And where do I need to push? What do I need to do to get more? Right? There are not many people who can do it. Yes, but there are such people. Yes, so you're absolutely correct. In our competitions, that would be what, 2 out of 50. That's 4%. Yes, and I think it's even all of those 50 teams are extremely well prepared. They undergo systematic preparation, for months, which stretches for months, And yet again, only very few can do it. And so it's a huge talent, gift. But we're slightly deviating from your book. Yes.
We're
Will
having a great
someone
conversation. It doesn't matter.
absolutely, Mark. Will someone find out how to negotiate like a panda after reading your book?
I would say they will understand how to prepare that way. That's the main thing. So everything in the book is meant to get you up to day one of negotiation. So we don't talk about gambits like good cop, bad cop, or red herrings or decoys or anything like that. We don't talk about tactical things like intonating your voice differently or body language or anything like that. We talk specifically about preparation and planning, because that's the thing that we think is most missing from the vast majority of sales conversations. And unfortunately, that's the least sexy part of negotiation, right? The sexy part of negotiation is the script and how we handle objections and how we intonate our voice differently and how we have different body language cues. And if I look up and to the left, what does that mean? And those kinds of that's the sexy part of negotiation. We don't deal in any of that kind of stuff. We only deal in preparation and planning and strategy within the book, because that's where it's most missing. That's the biggest area where most people are really lacking.
Fundamentals, yes. So, Mark, if you were to give one advice, not nine, yes, nine, no, not nine secrets, you have to restrict it to only one advice, yes, to aspiring B2B sales people, yes, what would it be?
Learn how to concede properly. I think the vast majority of salespeople, in fact, we know the vast majority of salespeople that we work with have no idea how to
To
protect
concede.
value in their negotiations. No idea. They're very good at building value, but they're not very good at protecting value. And so when they get to the commercial negotiation, if they're faced with a good procurement person, the procurement person is going to say, we need a 35% discount off of this thing. And they just keep grinding and grinding and grinding and grinding until the salesperson keeps giving, right? Doesn't know how to ask for anything in return, doesn't know how to taper concessions, doesn't know how to give a portion of whatever it is that they're trying to give, and doesn't know how to manage the perception of scarcity in their negotiations. And inevitably what ends up happening is that the salesperson just ends up feeding the procurement person with everything that the procurement person wants, because the procurement person is just not going to give up unless they hear no.
That's their job.
That's their job. That is what they are paid to do. So when that happens, it's really sad. It's really sad to see, because you've built up so much value over the course of the sale, only for it to all be eaten away
By the
in a
procurement lions.
negotiation, right? And now you're stuck, right? So learn how to concede. And if you can learn how to concede properly and ask for something, and by the way, that sounds like a strange thing to say, because I'm asking you to learn how to give something away and how to ask for something in return. Most of us go into a negotiation not expecting to give much away. And the downside to that kind of thinking is that you actually end up giving away a lot more
Giving
than
away
you
the,
should
yeah, yes,
in a
exactly. And
negotiation.
above all, the more important things, the things that are important, more important to you than they are to them.
Yeah, so
Um,
that's secret number 3. That's chapter number 3. Once you can
haven't
figure
read
out
it
that,
yet.
um, pick up the book, secret number 3. You'll be able
Secret
to
number
figure out how
three.
to do that.
All right. So typically, social techniques, the techniques of influencing would put the most important thing at the end, so that people read about the 8 previous secrets. You put it almost directly in the middle. Mark, my last question, always the same for all my guests. Who are the great negotiators for you? Anyone historically contemporary that has
Yeah.
inspired you, that you admire? Yeah,
Yeah, hang on.
who would you mention?
Let me just look in my bookcase here to see if I mean there's so many. My favorite, here it is. My favorite of all time is Herb Cohen's You Can Negotiate Anything. I'm a massive Herb Cohen fan. Have been for forever. I think he's brilliant. I think the things that he's able to understand about human behavior, no one else is able to do just because of how he's dedicated that. But I've got an entire list of books that I recommend at the end of my book, where I say, okay, don't stop here, because I really believe in that. Don't stop here. Go and read all of the books that you can on negotiations. And then I give people a list of books under recommended reading where I talk about, getting to yes, of which I disagree with many things in that book, but it's still a brilliant book. No one can discount that. Start with no, The Art and Science of Negotiation by Howard Rafa, Influence by Cialdini, The Art of Seduction by Robert Greene. Like, there's 20 books basically in there where I talk about all the different things that I found to be really beneficial, that I think are really brilliant book. Kelt Jensen's in there, for example. Like, these are great guys. And by the way, disagree with many of the things that they say. But that's why it's so important, because we get stuck in confirmation bias, right? Like, we go and find information to support a pre-existing idea that we already had. Don't do that with your education. That's dumb. Go and find differing ideas that help you to think differently.
Mark, thank you so much for being with us today. What a great conversation we've had, right? I'm sure it was super hard for you not to refrain from yourself from asking questions, which you could contain yourself only to the degree it was absolutely necessary. Thank you so much for your patience. To you guys, to our listeners and viewers. Here, 9 secrets to win deals and influence stakeholders. A field guide to B2B negotiations is out now. I will add a link to it in the comments. Guys, grab the book, order your book. It's definitely worth it. Mark, thank you so much for being with us. And until next time on the podcast on negotiation. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.